Good evening to everyone gathered here. I'm Mohammed Tariq, interns team of Biodiversity Conservation Foundation. We all have one goal, that is to conserve nature. More say, to not disturb its wilderness. We as a human being who coexist with ecosystem, we aren't fixers. Instead, we strive to make sure nature's true potential doesn't get lost in the new world. Their exceptional resilience being their true potential, we as a team aspire to create a world where the environment doesn't need protection. We, Biodiversity Conservation Foundation India, as a team ensure passionate involvement towards conservation of wildlife and natural resources. Our team also works in creating awareness among common people and drive young minds towards conservation. We strongly believe that awareness is the major factor that helps people understand the natural world and diverge them from mistreating it. With more than 40 webinars collaborating experts from around globe, this platform connects the volunteers holding various degrees of environmental knowledge varying from low to high with international experts. The team actively held numerous webinars about the biodiversity of world, land, air, even during the lockdown, ensuring the conservation and awareness carried out stays independent of pandemic. And of course, our journey doesn't stop here. We extend our role through various research based studies and on field conservation measures. We actively encourage young minds and involve them in projects that can nurture their knowledge and skill. Our team has grown tremendously ever since the establishment of BCF India. Today is yet another day where we tell ourselves that protecting the planet cannot be done by a single government or organization. I welcome you all once again for an international webinar on application of remote sensing in forest resource management and conservation. Over to you, my team member Ms. Mena Johnson, for introducing our honorable speaker, Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy. Thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of BCF India, I, Marina Johnson, intern of BCF, privileged in introducing our today's speaker, Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy, Head of Forest, Biodiversity and Ecology Division, National Remote Sensing Center of Indian Space Research Organization. Today, it's another milestone for BCF in connecting with Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy in this 44th International webinar. He took his bachelor's degree from Government Degree College, Siddipet, and MSc in Botany from Osmania University, Hyderabad. He took his PhD in Botany from the Kakatiya University, Warangal. Dr. Reddy joined the National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad in 2001. He is currently the head of Forest Biodiversity and Ecology Division, National Remote Sensing Center of Indian Space Research Organization. He is known for his contributions to the development of remote sensing and GIS in biodiversity and forest ecology, including plant taxonomy in India. His expertise in angiosperm taxonomy and forest ecology, and also in botanical exploration, phytodiversity characterizing remote highlight few of them are. He was placed as one of the top 2% scientists of the world for the year 2019 from India. And he has also received Hari Om Ashram Prerit Dr. Vikram Sarabhai Research Award in 2017 from Physical Research Laboratory, Department of Space, Government of India. Professor M.B. Raizada Medal Award in 2016 from Association for Plant Taxonomy, India. Professor P.R. Pisharedi Memorial Award in 2014 from Indian Society of Remote Sensing, Dr. S.K. Jain Medal Award in 2018 from Association for Plant Taxonomy, India, Bharati Vikas Ratan Award in 2010 from All India Business Development Association, New Delhi, City Strategist Award in 2009 from the Foundation for Futuristic Cities from Hyderabad, ISRO Young Scientist Merit Award in 2009 from the Department of Space, Government of India, and Certificate of Merit from Chairperson of Global Invasive Species Information Network, US Geology Survey for contributions to invasive flora of India in 2009, and he is Fellow of Indian Botanical Society, Association for Plant Taxonomy India, and Indian Association for Angiosperm Taxonomy. He has received Certificate of Appreciation from Andhra Pradesh Biodiversity Board, Government of Andhra Pradesh in 2009 for the contributions to the flora of Andhra Pradesh and from the Ministry of Environment and Forests for Supreme Court Director EIA Studies in Karnataka in 2011. He has also received Best Research Paper Prize in various national and international conferences. He has published over more than 400 research articles and has done 16 projects. BCF is happy in connecting the eminent professionals, stakeholders, students, and public on this international webinar during this COVID-19. We are delighted to connect our eminent speaker, Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy, Head of Forest Biodiversity and Ecology Division, National Remote Sensing Center of Indian Space Research Organization, on this virtual forum and waiting to listen on application of remote sensing in forest resource management and conservation. Over to you, sir. Thank you all.
Good evening, one and all. First, I would like to thank Dr. Kumar Guruji for organizing this international webinar on the remote sensing applications for forest management and conservation. I take privilege and that he has given a good opportunity to expose our research activities as well as the inputs for the conservation and management of the resources. For the last 3 months, Dr. Kumar Guruji is with me. He is finally this date we fixed for the purpose of and benefit of many people who are interested in the conservation of nature and natural resources. So my topic of presentation is that the applications of remote sensing in forest resource management and conservation. Before going to the main content of presentation, I would like to give the definitions of 4 important terms which are relevant for this presentation. One is forestry. So forestry is not just a study of the forest. Forestry is the science and art of planting, managing, conserving, and restoring forests and associated resources for the human and environmental benefits, especially for the conservation of the biodiversity and also to improve the living conditions of the people. So the forest is like in a grassland or wetland. It is also one of the ecosystem which plays a major role, and it is a part of the total complex ecology. So then ecology. The ecology is the study of how organisms interact with one another and with their physical environment. And there are 4 important levels for studying of the ecology. They are organism ecology, population ecology, community ecology, and the ecosystem ecology. So then only we have the comprehensive information on the ecological aspects once if you have the data on all the 4 aspects. Then the biodiversity. Biodiversity is not a simple term. It is not just species richness. It is a very complex term and defined variously by the various experts. So as per the Convention on Biological Diversity, the definition of biodiversity is that mostly the majority of the ecologists and the people who are working for the natural resources, they use the definition of this definition. That is, the biodiversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are part. So here in the biodiversity, we are having the 3 important levels of study. One is the diversity within species. Most commonly, we will say it as a genetic diversity. Then between species diversity and the diversity of the ecosystems. So if you want to do any kind of research or any kind of the conservation practice and any kind of restoration and any kind of the plantation activity, so one should think that it is not just the forestry or the ecology or biodiversity, all 3 are integrated together. So once if you are doing work on forestry or ecology, automatically you are also working on the biodiversity. So similarly, if you take the remote sensing is also one of the important technology. It is one of the state of art technology to help the different aspects of the forestry, ecology, and biodiversity. Then what is the remote sensing? The remote sensing for a layman, it is an eye in the sky. It never tells a lie. So the remote sensing is technically defined as the science and art of acquiring information about the Earth's surface without actually being in contact with it. And how it will be done, I am going to explain in the next slides. Then before, what are the questions? What are the major questions before us, especially for the people who are interested in the forest resource management and conservation? So here, like what exists or what is present at a certain location? What has changed in a place over time? What if this condition occurred at this place? So here we are doing like the hypothesis testing, predictive modeling, and that like if there is a loss of forest, what could be the scenario in terms of the human livelihoods and environment and climate change and global warming. Then how to monitor the natural resources, how to manage the natural resources, how to identify the highly diverse biodiversity rich landscapes, and how to address the different measurements required for essential biodiversity variables, how to get a more economic value from the forest resources, because forests are not like croplands, so they will introduce different kinds of hybrids or the cultivars. So the forest is a natural pristine kind of ecosystem, but still for the benefit of the human being, we are depending on the different forest resources. So our current objective is to go for sustainable utilization of the resources and at the same time to conserve the resources and also give some kind of economic benefit to the humankind. So finally, our major question is that to achieve the sustainable forest management. So to address all these, the relevant and interrelated questions, the only the technology is in support is the remote sensing. So my outline of presentation I am showing here in this slide. So I am going to define what is remote sensing, types of remote sensing, and then in the terms of applications, that what are the major utilization or the major applications the day-to-day community from like the state governments, Government of India, United Nations, and many policy-making organizations are using the technology in different ways. So my presentation covers almost all the major applications and also the different types of applications and the way we are using for the research as well as for the conservation purpose. So in the final slide, I'll show the way forward. Then for it is like a beginners. So everyone may not be having the knowledge of remote sensing, but it is not a limitation. The remote sensing is like a one kind of a software package or the technology, and it is very easy to learn. Like if you take me, basically I'm a plant taxonomist. I don't have any kind of expertise or any kind of a certificate course in the remote sensing. So after joining the National Remote Sensing Center, I have got some kind of training related to the basics of remote sensing and the basics of geographical information system. So it is only for a person to learn. It is a very easy tool, and the technology, it will take only very few months to study the remote sensing and to implement the remote sensing for the betterment of the resources and also for the different kinds of the studies we can able to do with the remote sensing. So remote sensing, basically, it depends on the principles of the electromagnetic spectrum. So mostly it is a physics, but we need not to bother much about what is the physics behind the remote sensing. So for a introductory, I'll say that the electromagnetic energy incident on the surface features. Surface features means on the Earth's surface, like forest, water, agricultural land, barren land, snow cover, like. So the electromagnetic energy incident on the surface features are partially reflected, absorbed, or transmitted. And mainly, there are two types of the remote sensing systems, like optical sensor system, and another one is the radar system. Within the optical sensor system, we are having the two important zone regions of electromagnetic spectrum. One is the visible region, another is the infrared region. So if you see this, the total electromagnetic spectrum of visible, infrared and microwave, the visible portion of remote sensing is very limited and very small. Like the wavelength region of 0.4 micrometer to zero point 0.7 micrometer is covered under the visible region. So what is visible? Visible, whatever we are seeing with our naked eye, our eyes, that is the visible region. So they like the colors like the blue, green, red, such kind of the colors we can able to see in the visible region. But it is very limited and we can't able to see any information beyond the visible region by the physical sensing or with normal instruments. So there is a more information is available in the different wavelength regions, especially like the near infrared region, middle infrared region, short wave infrared region, and then thermal infrared region. So for example, if you take the spectral signature of the vegetation, the vegetation has the high reflectance values in the near infrared portion. But in the blue, green, red, the percentage of the reflectance is very limited. So by using the natural color of blue, green, red, we can't able to perceive the different types of species or different types of the plant communities. And similarly, we can't able to sense physically the land surface temperature or skin temperature. It is very difficult to say what is the temperature in and around of your area. So that is only possible through the thermal remote sensing. And then one more, the remote sensing technique, which is very popular, and that is the radar system. So radars are mostly like the microwave remote sensing, and the utility of the microwave remote sensing is mostly popular during the cloud conditions or during the night hours or during the emergency situations. And in addition to the emergency management or disaster management or the applications related to other things, the microwaves also have remote sensing also became one of the vital and important remote sensing technology for different applications. Then there are like if you see the remote sensing basics, the remote sensing has the different components or the processes. So in the literature there are the components listed are only 7. They are like the one is energy source. So in the case of optical sensor system, the energy source is the sunlight. In the case of the radar system, it is working like your camera flashlight. So it is giving the energy on the targeted object and it is receiving the energy back. So these two are different. Then the number 2 is the radiation and atmosphere. So atmosphere is a medium to get the energy to the object and also in return to the sensor. So there is an interaction with the target. The 4 is the recording of energy by sensor. So like our eye, the remote satellites are having different kinds of sensors and they have different kinds of the characteristics to get the information. The 5th is the data transmission to ground station. So like in our NRSC, at Shadnagar, we are having a ground station. We will receive the data related to Indian remote sensing satellites and also the foreign satellite data. And we are also having the one separate department on the data reception, and a second major department is on image processing, and third department is related to interpretation, analysis, and the application. So here it's not that after getting the information in the image form or in the signal form, our work is over. Once after having that information from signal form to image form, as an expert from the ecology or an expert in the taxonomy or maybe the expert of multidisciplinary sciences, they can able to extract the information for a better application purpose and better management of the resource. So again, I'm touching on one more basic, that visible and near infrared interaction. Like if you have the leaf, like the dicot leaf and the monocot leaf. In the dicotyledons, there are 2 types of tissues or cells. They are known as, one is palisade mesophyll and the spongy mesophyll. The palisade mesophyll is just near to the upper epidermis, and it contains the chloroplasts. So all the chlorophyll pigments are mostly concentrated in the palisade mesophyll. It absorbs the blue and red energy and reflects the green light. That is why we are seeing the vegetation in a green color. Why? Because there is an absorbance in the blue and red and high reflectance in the green light. Then there is another tissue is the spongy mesophyll. Here, if you see, the main criterion or the interest here is that it determines the reflectance mostly in the near infrared and shortwave infrared region. So it is just based on the cell structure of the leaves. So high reflectance in NIR results from the spongy mesophyll layer. It is composed of cells and air spaces. So it is having very few pigments. The majority of the pigments are in the palisade mesophyll. Then we have a different kind of plants. They are known as the monocotyledons, like the grasses or the cyperaceae members. So here we don't have a differentiation like a palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll. It is only having one type of mesophyll. Then how the healthy vegetation looks in the signal of the remote sensing. So once if you are understanding this, the spectral reference curve, then we can use this in different purposes. Like if you see in this spectral reference curve, there is a high reflectance value in the region of the 0.7 micrometer. If there is any disease or is there any stress on the vegetation, or in the if the vegetation is in the leaf senescence stage or leaf fall stage, the reflectance values will shift towards the blue region. So this red edge 0.7 micrometer is very much important for the assessment of the vegetation health. Similarly, like if you want to discriminate the dry forest and the wet forest, there the wavelength region of 1.6 meter to 2.1 micrometer is very much important. And similarly, some of the sensors are also having the shortwave infrared 1, shortwave infrared 2. So we can make use of the shortwave infrared region for the better discrimination of the wet forest and the dry forest. So there are even many interesting information is available, data sets are available to understand what is remote sensing and how the vegetation shows reflectance and how the vegetation can be separated from the agriculture, how vegetation can be separable from water body, barren land, or similar kind of other land surface features. There is a lot of amount of information is available. I'm not going in detail because of our main emphasis of this presentation is on the applications of remote sensing. So now again, the many people may have questions that why to use remote sensing. So here, this slide may give some information, the importance of the remote sensing. Because remote sensing is the only technology, it will collect the data very systematically. So like if you compare with the data collected by the taxonomist or an ecologist, it may be based on some kind of random sampling or selective sampling. It may not be repetitive in nature. They may not be collecting data on day basis or weekly basis or annual basis. And there is no systematic repeatability in the remote sensing. Sorry, there is no systematic repeatability in the general conventional methods. Then the major importance of the remote sensing is also lies in the global coverage. You will get the information about Earth in a very less time, multi-purpose information about the topography, land cover, weather. And it is only the solution for the areas which are mainly inaccessible. Like majority of our Western Ghats, Himalayas are not so easily accessible. So if you want to have any information of those mountainous regions, so the remote sensing only provide you the information on near real time. Then it is also provides the information about 3-dimension of real objects. The mostly like if you see the LiDAR or remote sensing, it provide you the structural information and all the details of the given object. Then like for example, like the global warming or the ongoing climate change, we need to have the global measurements. That is only possible through the remote sensing. Then one more important use is that there is a lot of radiation around us which is invisible to our eyes. I said that we can able to see only the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, but there is a lot amount of information is available in other wavelength regions. Then it is also have the explicit importance is that it requires very less human efforts. So if you say that the principles of remote sensing of the Earth are already identified by the United Nations in 1986, and all the countries are signatory and part of the United Nations principles for remote sensing of the Earth. And it says that the remote sensing shall promote the protection of Earth's natural environment and protection of mankind from natural disasters. So here onwards I am going to show you the applications, what we can map, monitor and predict with remote sensing. So this circle, so different information is available in these circles, like the various applications of remote sensing in the field of forestry, biodiversity and ecology. The first and foremost application of the remote sensing is the assessment of forest cover, the quantification of the forest resources and monitoring of the forest cover and prediction of the forest cover for past as well as for the future. Then it's not that only at level 1 we are only getting information of forest cover or change. We are also getting the information of the various forest types, communities and the species. And the species, especially in this case, the vegetation plant species. Then if you have the information from the sampling, and then if you have the remote sensing data, we can use that information for the assessment of timber, non-timber, biomass, carbon pools and fluxes. I'm going to give more information in the next slides. Then we can use the daily available remote sensing data for vegetation phenology monitoring and also for assessment of the vegetation health. And we can use the information to understand the threat to the forest. And now we have the data from the many satellites for the last 5 decades. From 1972 onwards, the first satellite, that is the Landsat MSS by NASA. So we are having many number of satellites, like now more than 100 satellites are available to assess the resources in different periods. So once if you have the such type of the historical information from 1972 from satellite imageries, we can able to identify the areas which are very vulnerable for deforestation, degradation, and many other such type of phenomena. And we can use the multi-sensor remote sensing data to characterize the habitat. And also we can able to link the remote sensing applications also in the field of the ecosystem services. And by using the very high resolution images, we can able to count and we can able to make a precise assessment of the trees which are found outside the forest. And also we can use the remote sensing based information for the species distribution modeling. And finally, we can able to identify the biodiversity significant areas or biological significant areas by using ecological concepts and by using the GIS based criteria. So now I'm showing the different kinds of satellite images which are giving information on day-to-day basis. This is the one science satellite and it is known as a MODIS, Moderate Resolution Imaging Sensor. It is the one of the flagship sensor developed by NASA for science and conservation. So this, it will provide you the daily information of the greenness or the land cover information. And I have shown here the 2 images of the same area, South Asian region. And you can able to see that there is a difference in the 2 images. One image I have given a title of the false color composite image, and another image is shown as a natural color. So in the natural color, you are very much clear that you are seeing the combinations of blue, green, red. So all these 3 primary colors will give you the different kinds of shades and different kinds of subcolors. And it's very clear that in the natural color composite, that like the western part of South Asia, mainly like Afghanistan, is having the desert portion. Like if you see the northeast portion of the northeast part of India and also in Myanmar, you have more greenness. So it is a typical forest. So there is a gradation in the vegetation from Afghanistan to the Myanmar. Similarly, if you see here in the false color composite, here I am showing the information in false color. It means it is not a true color. So what I did here, I have converted the near infrared portion of energy to red as green and green as blue. So I made a standard false color composite image to identify the features which are not able to recognize through natural color composite. For example, if you see this in the Pakistan part of India and the Pakistan side of northern part of Pakistan and the southern part of Pakistan and eastern, western, and similarly in Myanmar and many portions, if you see, you can able to discriminate even forest from the agricultural lands. Like in the Pakistan, you can able to see that along that river basin, the much of the area is covered by agricultural lands. And again, there is a gap in the Rajasthan and part of Gujarat, that is a Kutch desert, and there is again the Thar desert, they are appearing in a different color. And again, if you see in the Himalaya, you are having the white color, that is referred as snow. And again, in the southern part of the India, there are some areas which are shown in the white color. It is just because of the persistence of clouds during the time of accretion. But earlier I have shown in the earlier image South Asia, and that MODIS image is having three types of resolutions, like 250-meter resolution, 500-meter resolution, and 1 kilometer. So if any object having the spatial extent or the size of below 250 meter, we can't able to discriminate through MODIS image. But that is very ideal and very useful for day-to-day assessment at global level and the national level. And then we are having our own satellite system, that is Indian Remote Sensing System, the IRS. We call it popularly IRS satellite data. Here I am showing the two types of sensors. One is the AWIPS and another is the LIS3. And what is the AWIPS and what is LIS3? So here I am showing the false color composite image for Telangana state. Here it is very clear that the false color composite of AWIPS is only showing a general information of the different kinds of land types. But you can't able to get more like level 3 or level 4 kind of classification. You can't able to achieve through AWIPS. Why? Because the AWIPS spatial resolution is only 56 meter, whereas the LIS3 is having the spatial resolution of 23.5 meter by 23.5 meter. So you can able to identify any object which is having the area size of more than 23.5 meter by 23.5 meter. So like you can able to, for example, the difference is like any small water body having less than 50 meter is not able to discriminate through AWIPS. Whereas in the water body which is having less than 50 meter by 50 meter area also, you can able to map through LIS3 data. Then if you want to know the information at tree level or the community level, that is not possible by LIS3 or AWIPS because the spatial resolution is very limited. For example, I said that in the earlier image, the LIS3 is having 23.5 meter by 23.5 meter. So any object is falling below that size, like one small tree, you can't able to discriminate through LIS3. But by having the high resolution or very high resolution images, you can able to capture the information at the individual tree level and also the groups of trees. And the one more important information you will get in the high resolution images like WorldView 2 and Cartosat is that they are having the spatial resolution of better than 1 meter. So it means you can able to identify the individual buildings, individual trees, and you can use this information, like for example, like the assessment of the trees outside the forest, and also you can use this information for the tree census. Then one more important application is that the thermal infrared region of remote sensing. Here I am showing one imagery of the Simlipal forest in Orissa. It is the data acquired on 21st April 2017. So the false color composite image clearly shows that like the red here is the green. So the large amount of greenness is found only in the central and southern parts of the Simlipal. Whereas in the northern part of Simlipal is having mostly the deciduous forest. So you are seeing the color or the information in the form of light greenish color. But since it is a false color composite, the light greenish color here is the deciduous forest. It means there is no any tree foliage on given date. So once if you compare, like on the 21st April, if you see the deciduous forest versus the semi-evergreen forest, there is a difference in the land surface temperature. And also, like if you see that southern part of the imagery, you are having the grasslands at the southwest portion of the Simlipal is having the grasslands. So there is a difference in the temperature because the trees are having more foliage and more complex structures. So those areas will have the less temperature as compared with the grasslands. So it will. It's not just we are getting the information of the degradation. How? Like if you have the very dense forest and like you have done some kind of selective logging, that you can't able to discriminate in the optical region, that is like the at very high like dense forest areas, there will be a saturation in the optical sensing, especially like the normalized difference vegetation index. You can't able to identify the degradation in the dense forest. But whereas by using the information from the thermal infrared region, we can able to see that if there is a even the selective felling of some trees, there will be a change in the surface temperature of that area. So automatically you can able to say that there is some degradation. If they're like, for example, if you are doing like more afforestation in the forest, it means you are increasing the density of trees. So automatically by increasing the density of trees, there will be more tree canopy closure, and that those areas will have less temperature. So this database is also useful for degradation and also to understand the impact of afforestation on the regional climate. And also we can use this information, like if you're like a plant taxonomist, you can use that the preferential locations or preferential habitats of different species by using this kind of the land surface temperature data. And again, I would like to emphasize that this data is available free of cost, and we need to have a very little training of the remote sensing. So another portion of remote sensing, that is the radar. In the visible, we are very much clear. We are seeing all the features in a natural color composite, and by applying the infrared portion, we are seeing more information, but we are converting the colors to get the more information. Then in the case of radar, it is all working in a different types of principles. Like it considers mostly the surface roughness and the moisture content in a given place. So there are here the radar importance is that since because of the long wavelengths, it can penetrate through clouds, especially like the floods, like in the recent floods of Hyderabad. So NRC has utilized the radar images like RadarSat, RISat, this kind of sensors by the microwave portion. And then one more important the sensor is that the ALAS pulsar. It is having a very important band called L band. So here by using such type of bands like L band and P band, you can able to make a very good assessment of the biomass. And but with the visualization is different. You can't able to see the features in the case of the visible infrared region. We are very much know that this color corresponds to this color. But here we have to make a different kind of mosaics by using the different kinds of the polarimetry and side looking angle of the sensor and different types of like strip resolution. So I'm not going in that detail. That takes more time. And then again, to have a very good database of topography, like especially for the biodiversity people, we say that the evergreen forest is found in high elevation region, deciduous forest is in low elevation, mangroves are still almost very near to the elevation of the sea. So to make such type of the information of the different elevation zones, slope, aspect, you need to have the radar data. And now there are different missions, like in India we are having CARTODEM. It provides you the resolution of 10 meter digital elevation model. Shuttle radar topography mission, this is one of the pioneer mission by the NASA. So here we are having the two resolutions like 90 meter resolution and 30 meter, and even there is a DEM called ASTER. It provides you information at 30 meter. So, and again this is also freely available through the web search. Then after radar, the LiDAR is one of the important and the advanced technology. So the information here is not like direct like the imaging kind of thing. Here the LiDAR is a different or unique method, and it will measure the distances by illuminating the target with laser light and measures the reflection with a sensor. So here we will use the two terms like pulse and return. Light energy emitted by LiDAR system is known as pulse, and the light reflected from the ground or the object is known as a return. So what we will do here as an image processing expert, we will study the differences in laser return times and wavelengths, and then we will make the digital 3D representations of the target, and that is most commonly known as a point cloud. So the individual trees can be extracted from the point cloud to determine the tree height and also the crown shape and crown width. And finally, the LiDAR, especially in the case of forestry, is very much useful for the accurate measurement of the tree height, volume, and also finally for the biomass and carbon sequestration studies. And there is one more development in LiDAR technology. It's not only that LiDARs are through aircrafts. Now, there are instruments like terrestrial laser scanning, TLS. Those instruments are available. So you can able to make a imaging of the areas of your interest and generate the vegetation structural parameter information and also the biomass distribution of a given forest. So here onwards, I am giving more emphasis on the proper applications and the major applications of the remote sensing, that the forest cover and the change assessment. In the central portion of this slide, I shown one high resolution image. So here in the central portion, you are having the plantation, and the plantation is surrounded by a natural forest. So the plantation is appearing in a dark brown color, and whereas the natural forest is appearing in a medium or light green color. Then what is forest? So here, since we are using the remote sensing technology, we are having some kind of the technical limitations, and we have the technical considerations that to define a forest. So then for a normal man, I need not to say what is forest, but here in the field of remote sensing GIS and for the policy considerations, we have to adapt the remote sensing technology, and we have to use the remote sensing technology to assess the forest cover at the country level to the global level. So here I'm showing one Shola forest. So that is forest we can able to discriminate very properly. There may not be any ambiguity to discriminate the Shola forest of Western Ghats. But even if you are coming to the complex mosaic of forest, it may be having some plantations, it may be having some wood plantation, or maybe a teak plantation, a rubber plantation. So then we need to have the expertise of the field as well as the expertise on the remote sensing data interpretation. So why again I shown 4 pictures related to forest or trees. So there is a meaning here. One is that like we are having different agencies to map the forest cover. Like at the global level, we are having FAO, United Nations organization, that is the Food and Agriculture Organization. They are also doing the periodical assessment of the forest cover at global level. So they are also very much involved in the forest resource assessment. And in the country level, we are having the FSI, Forest Survey of India, that is in Dehradun. They are doing the biennial assessment of the forest cover. And we at NRC, we are working on differentiating the different land cover types, like we are separating the natural forest, plantation, orchard, cropland, grassland, trees outside forest. Every feature we are separating as in the form of like a land cover map. So then what is the difference? The problem here is there are different kinds of definitions. If you see in the literature, there are more than 800 definitions are available for the forest. But basically, we are using 3 types of definitions here. Like one definition is that based on the predominant land use. For example, FAO definition is based on the predominant land use. Like for example, if you take like the Trivandrum district in Kerala or the Western Ghats of Kerala. So here, the majority of the forest is associated with the rubber plantation or some kind of a other plantation. So then, as per the definition of the FAO, it is a forest. And then, what is the definition given by FSI? This definition is based on the tree cover. Here, they are not differentiating based on the predominant land cover. Here, they will include all the lands which are having more than 1 hectare in area, and the areas which are having more than 10% of tree canopy cover, and that is irrespective of land ownership or legal status. So what is happening here, based on the FSI definition, like your coconut plantations, tea gardens, if they are having the area unit of more than 1 hectare and the canopy threshold like more than 10%, then it is known as a forest. So there is some difference in the FAO definition and FSI forest cover definition. It's not that only FSI definition is having this type of information. Even Hansen's, the recently published paper in Science, they also used the definition of tree cover. So they defined the forest based on tree cover percentage. Similarly, many countries are going with the tree cover definition for the forest. But we at NRC, we are having information of the different types of categories, including the natural forest. So this is a map prepared by NRSC, and as part of the long-term forest cover change assessment, we have generated a very unique database and a very comprehensive database which was not available so far. That is the information of the forest cover from 1930s to the recent period. So this is one of the output map, shows the distribution of the dense forest and open forest. For the dense forest, the standard definition is that the tree canopy cover is more than 40% in a given unit area, whereas in open forest, the tree canopy cover is between 10% to 40%. So if any unit area it is having less than 10% of tree cover, that is known as a shrubland or scrub. Then how to analyze the change? Here I am showing 2 images of the same place. It is a part of Gudem RV Nagar range in Visakhapatnam district. So it is in the false color composite image of 2007, you are seeing the large amount of the redness. That is actually a greenness forest cover information. The forest is well distributed in all the 4 cells. Here each cell is having the extent of 100 meter by 100 meter. So almost all the 4 cells are having predominantly the forest cover. But once if you are using the same day, same calendar month, and then the different year, there is a change in the spectral response of the pixel. So that spectral response of the pixel is automatically appearing in a different tone or texture or different color. So once there is a change in the spectral response of the pixel, it is automatically, we will consider it as a spatial change or abrupt change or maybe a seasonal change. But in this case, it is a forest cover change. And the majority of this area is now converted to the shifting cultivation. So we can able to estimate that within this yellow box, we are having 4 cells of each 1 hectare. So the more than 75% of loss of forest is very much evidenced by this to-date imaging. So these are the maps prepared by National Remote Sensing Center. And here I am highlighting the maps for 1880, 1930, 1975, 1985, 1995, 2005, and 2013. So all the maps here are based mostly on using the satellite remote sensing data, except the 1880 and 1930. 1930s forest cover maps we prepared using the Survey of India topographical maps prepared by the US Army and published in the online open access. Then by using the different criteria and different ecological criteria and the principles of GIS and the concepts, we also modeled the forest cover for past and also for the future. So here I am showing the model forest cover, the predicted forest cover information for 1880. So this information is very much useful for the resource management point of view, and based on this information only we can able to identify the areas of change and no change. And these are the fractional forest cover maps we have uploaded and we are hosted in our Bhuvan platform. It is an official platform by Government of India through NRSC and ISRO. So we hosted this information for the use by the researchers as well as for the resource managers. So by using this information, you can able to take any conservation interventions, and also you can use this information also to improve the stock of the forest. And for especially like the people like in the taxonomy and ecology, there may be an interest to model the species extinctions. So you can able to use this type of database to link with the species distribution information. For example, like the Botanical Survey of India is having the information of more than 1 century information, and they collected the species data from the different localities of forests in India. But once if you make that analog kind of information, and if you are bringing that information into a digital platform, we can able to see that those locations still they are available in the name of forest or the trees, or is there any change in the vegetation pattern, or is there any loss of forest. So once if you make that digital surface of those, the distillation of those species locations of Botanical Survey of India, or the sighting locations by the Geological Survey of India or Wildlife Institute of India, you can able to see the habitat distribution or any change in the habitat condition or the extent of the habitat. That kind of modeling and that kind of scenarios we can able to build through the long-term forest cover change data sets. So here I am showing one map. Here duration is more than 8 decades, the long-term forest cover change. Here I am giving the map of the forest loss areas, forest gain areas, and no change areas. And finally, the outcome of this data is that we can able to quantify the forest loss more precisely. Otherwise, is not possible with any kind of methods or data. So here, if you see that the majority of the loss of forest occurred in Nepal, more than 48%. Then Bangladesh, 39% of forest cover has losses there. Pakistan, around 38%. Sri Lanka, 37%. Myanmar, 34%. India has shown the loss of 28% of forest cover in last 8 decades. Then in the case of Afghanistan and Bhutan, it is less than 10%. So what it gives us, it gives very clear information about the earlier extent of the forest cover information and what is the current scenario. So in the last 8 decades, except like Bhutan, all the countries have shown the largest scale deforestation. But if you see in terms of the geographical coverage, India is a major country. It almost like occupies the 85% of the geographical area of South Asia. So automatically there is a huge loss in terms of the area in square kilometers. May not be in the percentage, because when you are calculating the percentage of loss, we will consider within this what is the forest and what is the total loss of in terms of the percentage. But if you take in terms of area coverage, the more loss happened in the India. Then what is the use? Okay, that assessment is different. Okay, that has given you only the information that what is there earlier and what is the present situation. But to address the global conservation targets like CBD, India is a party to India is a signatory to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and it is also party to the Paris Agreement and also the many conventions related to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and such kind of the global agreements. So now here I am showing that the utilization, it is not that only for one country. We can able to assess for the other different countries that what is the scenario of the deforestation, because all the countries have committed to reduce the rate of deforestation by 2020 as part of Aichi International Biodiversity Targets. So if you see this trend, 1930 to 1975, except the Afghanistan and Bhutan, there is a large scale deforestation. It is almost like more than 0.6% of forest loss annually in different countries. And then with reference to this, our convention and the Paris Agreement or the CBD Aichi targets, we give more preference to 1995 to 2014. And there is also high value for the 1995 because the Honorable Supreme Court of India has given a specific order to stop any kind of tree felling from the natural forest. So with reference to country and with reference to the global agreements, this kind of assessment or quantification is very much required. So if you see here, the India is and other countries mostly are showing the declining trend of rate of deforestation. The only two countries they are having still, even though they are also party to CBD and other global conventions, but the Bangladesh and Myanmar still they are unable to stop the rate of deforestation. They are like if you see the Myanmar, it is almost showing stable rate of deforestation, but in the case of the Bangladesh, there is an increasing trend of rate of deforestation. So this is very much useful for the global level discussions and to set the policy targets very precisely, and also to address the country's preferences and their resources, and also to provide some kind of financial benefit to the developing countries like Bangladesh to stop the rate of deforestation and to improve the forest stock. So then one more application is that the vegetation type classification. As an ecologist, you may be knowing that definition of the forest type. Like here, I would like to emphasize again, the forest here, a unit of vegetation with distinct structure, distinct phenology, unique floristics, and have different kinds of the biotic influences and also different kinds of topography and climate. So once if you are differentiating one type of forest to another type of forest, it should satisfy the different criteria of the structure, function, and phenology or composition. So these three you can able to get directly through satellite-based remote sensing, and other information like the climate data and topography also is available through the remote sensing data sets. So by using this information from climate, topography, and the structural, functional, compositional information from remote sensing, we can able to map different types of the vegetation types. So this is the one map we published in the Global and Planetary Change. So it shows the distribution of vegetation types and land cover in South Asia and Myanmar. And overall, it gives the information that the 77% of geographical area is covered by the vegetation. Mainly, the agriculture is predominant vegetation cover area, that is 41%. Then the second important vegetation cover is the forest. It is covers only 19% of the total geographical area. Then grasslands are around 6.7%, scrub is 5.9%, and plantations occupies the 4.3% of geographical area. So now if you consider like the definition by FSI, then this 4.3% will go under the forest. Then for especially like the community level characterization of biodiversity, and also to address the climate change or climatic variability, we need to have the high temporal remote sensing data. So now, thanks to the European Space Agency, and they are now providing the Sentinel-2 datasets at every 5-day interval, and the resolution is 10 meter. So almost you can able to target the species communities at 10 meter by 10 meter area, and you are having the free access, and they are providing the rectified datasets. So you can use the data directly, and you can able to make a better characterization of the vegetation. For example, here we did one kind of assessment that by using the vegetative phenological principles of the different vegetation systems, we identified 15 phenological matrix maps. So through using this every 5-day high resolution data, you can able to make a leaf onset time, leaf offset time, and peak green season time or length of greening season time. And then by using like our floras, as a taxonomist, what we will do, will make a key that, okay, if the leaves with reticulate venation, dicotyledons, leaves with parallel venation, they are monocotyledons. Similarly, such type of key we can able to build based on these 15 phenological matrix maps. So each tree or each species community may be having a different kind of the start of season or different kind of leaf end of season, or maybe different kind of the peak green season, and the brown days or growing days, everything you can able to characterize through the high temporal remote sensing. And once if you have such type of calendar information for each year, is there any change in the patterns of phenology, we can able to attribute through ongoing climate change. Third one is the combine and assign approach. In stratify and multiply approach, it is like a very simple technique. Here we will just use the forest cover map or the forest cover density map with the two classes like dense forest and open forest, and simply we will extrapolate. Okay, the dense forest is having 100 tons per hectare, open forest is having 50 tons per hectare. Just we will convert with reference to the forest area of that class. So it is a simple measurement, and most of the global assessments they'll use generally stratified and multiply approach. Then the second important technique is the direct remote sensing approach. Here the input is field measurement, again as like in stratified and multiply approach. But in the case of stratified and multiply approach, the field measurements are equally important like the remote sensing data sets. Remote sensing data products like forest cover and forest canopy density maps. But in the direct remote sensing approach, we are mostly depending on the remote sensing derived indices like normalized difference vegetation index or enhanced vegetation index. So here the dependent variable is the your plot level biomass, and predictor variable is the vegetation index like your NDVI. But here also there is some limitation because the optical data sets like the NDVI it saturates in the dense forest. So there may not be a precise assessment for the dense forest by using the NDVI kind of techniques. So but here for the validation purpose we are using the field plot data, and then we are evaluating the accuracy, and we are evaluating the regression with reference to plot data and the index. And there is one more application is possible through remote sensing, is that the using of the microwave remote sensing data. There are many studies, they used the L band region of the microwave portion, and they found that there is a direct correlation of the biomass versus the backscattering coefficient of the imaging. So here, even it is not sensitive in the dense forest, the microwave region, it can able to provide as much as the accuracy as possible in the because of the microwave principles. The third one is the combine and assign approach. The combine and assign approach is very advanced, and it will take care of like the first two methods. It is using all the principles and all the data sets, and it will give more priority for the machine learning techniques like your random forest classification or support vector machine methods. And then here it is not that only the just field sample plot data or NDVI you are using or backscattering you are using. Here you are using even the climatic parameters, like the around 19 climatic variables are available from the worldclim.org. So the climate data also you can use, the topography also data also you can use, and then we can rank the different areas based on the combine and assign approach. But it is very advanced, but and a little bit complicated as compared with the first two methods. So this is the one map we generated as part of our national carbon project, and we estimated the biomass density for the two different classes like dense forest and open forest. And overall, the Indian forest mean carbon density is estimated as the 49 tons carbon per hectare. So now this information is like one baseline data for the 2013 time period. So if there is an increase of this mean, so automatically it is attributed to the increased conservation measures and increased density of the forest and the increased environmental awareness by the people. So now again there is a difference of estimate, like the FAO global estimate says that at an average the forests are having like 71 tons of carbon per hectare, but the Indian forests are having less carbon density as compared with the global averaged values. Like for example, if you are comparing with like Amazon forest, the mean carbon density in the Amazon forest is more than 100 tons of carbon per hectare, but whereas Indian forests are having like around 49 tons of carbon per hectare. And it is not that it is a precise number, it may have some differences of estimate because of the like the sample plot size and the selection of the sampling method and the selection of the wood density value and the conversion values of biomass, and there are like different parameters are there. They will affect the accuracy of the prediction or the accuracy of the estimate. Like if you see the recent literature, they say that we can able to estimate the biomass or carbon stocks with the precision of 85%. we can't able to make 100% because of the, like, there may be a difference of measurement. Like when you are measuring a single tree, there is a, like you, one person may be saying like 45.4 centimeter, another person is saying 45.6 centimeters. So like if you add such type of errors, like at the plot level, and also like the plot size, like if once you are measuring like with 10 by 10 meter sample plots, you may be biased towards the dense forest. Again, like if you are taking like 0.1 hectare, you may be giving high preference to edge forest. So there are different kinds of issues are there, and all these like plot measurements, ground measurements, and the sampling strata, and all this can attribute, can be carry forward some kind of the inaccuracy in the output. So this is the one more important product we generated as part of National Carbon Project, that is assessing the trend in biomass carbon stock of forest. So here we have used the values from different publications, and also we have used the National Forest Inventory of the Forest Survey of India, and we also used the data sets published by Richards and Flint for the period of 1930 to the 1985. So they also modeled the biomass distribution and carbon stock distribution for the Indian forests, but they did it at state level. So we have also used the same the ecological degradation model and population model given by Richards and Flint, but we applied that equation at a 5 kilometer grid level to have a better precision, at least at a 5 kilometer into 5 kilometer grid level. So the overall result is that even though we are saying that there is no much change in the forest loss, it means even though there is a declining trend of rate of deforestation, and so almost like the forest is well preserved now on an area statistics basis, but the trend of 2005 to 2013 clearly shows that there is a more degradation of forest. So automatically, as part of Aichi biodiversity targets, we are saying that yes, we are protecting or conserving the forest as part of agreement. But once if there is a change in the density or the stock of forest, so again it may not be fulfilling the requirements as part of the Paris Agreement. Then again, the earlier analysis is only based on the forest ecosystems and for the larger areas, and there may be a lot of difference because of the different kinds of estimate. So now the growing technology is towards the LiDAR. It may be aerial LiDAR technology or maybe a ground-based terrestrial laser scanning. So this is one study we took in the parts of central India in Achanakmar Biosphere Reserve, and there we have established sample plots, and also the forest department got selected some trees because of some developmental activities. They would like to fell the trees. So once you have like the measurements based on destructive sampling, and the like in the earlier studies, like generally what we will use that the FSA has generated the volume equations for the different timber species, and generally we will apply for the given state. But if you want to have more precise, the destructive sampling is preferred, but that is not correct because of our global agreements and to conserve our nature. But still, because of the various developmental activities like the construction of roads or construction of dams for reservoirs, then there is a chance of loss of forest. So we took the advantage of such type of scenario, such type of situation in Madhya Pradesh, and we approached the state forest department, and they gave permission, because then we done the original measurement that before felling of tree and after felling of tree, and also we have calculated the wood density values with the support of the ICFRE center at Hyderabad and also ICFRE center at Bengaluru. We have done the precise estimate of the like wet weight, dry weight, and the carbon values we derived through the synergetic expertise from the forestry and the remote sensing. So there are various methods to for the precise estimate of the carbon stock at tree level. And earlier we used to have the cylinder based method. So we consider that every trunk is a cylinder, and we'll apply such type of equation for even branch and twig, but they may not be accurate because the given tree may not be following the cylinder kind of approach in the stem or branch. So based on the TLS, terrestrial laser scanning measurements, you can able to have a better precision. But here also, the instruments may have some kind of limitation, like even the instrument we used is that having a accuracy error of 8 millimeter. So 8 millimeter may not be a big question, but when once you are upscaling such type of information for small trees, it may have some implications. So what the method came recently was developed by the Stovall et al. And they have developed a very novel method to calculate the trunk volume instead of traditional cylinder-based approach. So that such type of novel methods are helping us in identifying and estimating the uncertainty of the tree volume or tree biomass. Then one more is that the NRC is working with the Forest Survey of India for operational monitoring of the forest fires. So in the foreground, I shown the image of the natural color composite imagery. So all the areas which are like only two patches are there, which are appearing in dark purple or black color, they are the areas affected by fire, and the remaining are not affected by fire. So here, the some portion of the dark purple area in the fringe having a red color. So that is an active fire location. So here now we are making use of the shortwave infrared because of to understand the background signature in the yesterday, the one day before and today, and also we are using the surface temperature information by thermal band. So such type of information is very much useful to track the fire spread and fire progression. So as part of the disaster support system, as part of ISRO's mandate, we are working on the forest fire response system. So as a research center, our major interest is to develop information on the areas which are prone to fire. So we are using the data sets from 1972 to till date. So from the different sensors, and we are making a historical database. And by using the information from like MODIS kind of sensors, they'll provide you daily information four times. So that by using such type of information, we are making the forest active fire location data. So each active fire location data will have like X and Y coordinate, and that data we are sharing with the different state forest departments almost in a near real time. We are sending this daily fire alerts 4 times, like morning 10:30, afternoon 1:30, and night 10:30, and again midnight in 1:30. So this database will be sent to their mobiles in the form of SMS alerts and also through email alerts, and we are providing the proper data sets for stopping the progression. And this data received by state forest guards, forest range officers, divisional forest officers, they will use this database for day-to-day monitoring of the forest fire. Then for an ecologist, there is a more interest to understand the carbon emissions and also to understand the damage to the forest structure and forest composition. So they can make use of the information of the historical database to understand what kind of damage happened to the areas which are undergoing recurrent fires or frequent fires, and the areas which are not affected by any time by fire. So you can able to see the variation in the composition and the structure of the forest. Then we are also generating the burnt area, especially we are having more preference for national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, and we are providing such type of data to the state forest departments on the request basis. So this is one such type of map we developed for India. It is a national forest burnt area map, but here instead of the map form, I am showing the distribution of the burnt area in the different districts with a different area coverage. So the districts which are highlighted in red color are affected by fires with an area of more than 1,000 square kilometer. Like if you see here, the Khammam district, the Prakasam district, Kadapa district, Chittoor, they are having the area coverage of fire more than 1,000 square kilometer. So this type of the prioritization would be helpful for the government of India to prioritize the resources and to conserve the forests of that locality. So overall, the information says that out of 640 districts, 387 districts shows forest fires. And at state level, the analysis clearly brings that the Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Chhattisgarh got affected by more number of fires, and there is a more area coverage because of the fire disturbances. So this is the one product we are providing to the all state forest departments and also Ministry of Environment and Forest is that the daily monitoring of the forest fires in India. So if you see this map very clearly that it's an animation made based on the Modi's active fire locations on daily basis, one particular year of 2014. So this information is very much useful for the conservation and resource managers to have a better planning strategies and better mechanism to identify the areas of the high proneness and the areas of the threat to the endemic species or the endangered species. So it's not that just for the conservation point of view, for a research point of view also, you can able to study like the studies on the damage assessment and you can able to identify some solutions to stop the fires. So these are the two important databases we developed and published in the peer-reviewed journals. One is that the product of forest fire frequency. So it is shows like one kind of fire regime analysis, clearly identifying the areas of no fire. Like in South Asia, the Bhutan, Arunachal Pradesh have the much number of fire locations, and the fire frequency is very limited in the Bhutan and Arunachal Pradesh. They are mostly in eastern Himalayas. And similarly, the parts of Western Ghats also not affected by fires because mostly they are having the typical wet evergreen forest and the semi-evergreen forest with high amount of moisture. But however, in the case of the Northeast India and parts of Bangladesh, the fire frequency is very high. There are two reasons here. One is that the majority of the land is under the ownership of the village communities. The second one is that even though these are the evergreen forests or moist forests, because of this shifting cultivation practice, these forests are almost at every year level or at alternate year, those areas are affected by fires. And then if you take like in the central part of Andhra Pradesh, and then northern part of Telangana, there is a huge amount of fires because they are having a typical dry deciduous forest ecosystems. So if you put any fire incidentally and accidentally, that covers majority of the area and affects the regeneration and affects the sampling stratum. So one more product, because for the scientific management of the forest resources and also to strengthen the fire management, we have modeled the fire locations distribution for the last 15 years. And we found that here I'm showing both even agricultural residue fires in Punjab and Haryana also. So here, based on the historical data to the current date, we can able to build a very good model and we can able to make a very excellent categories of the hotspots. So it is not that only like in Nalamala forests are like fire hotspots, but they are the sporadic hotspots or intensifying hotspot or the diminishing hotspots. We can't able to make any understanding just based on one type of hotspot map. But if you have like the information of more than 1 decade or more than 15 years, we can able to identify the areas of the different kinds of the conservation interventions. So recently even we found a very important result for the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve area, and Dr. K.V. Satish, he worked on the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, and he not only used like the coarse resolution, he also used the Indian remote sensing data, IRS-LIS3 and IRS-AVX data for the more than 10 years, and we found that there is a declining trend of hotspot area for fires in Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. And similarly, such type of approach we have used here, but here we used only the Modi's coarse resolution data, but it is very good because of the high temporal length. So here you are having the daily fire location data, and by integrating those information, we identified the areas of persistent hotspots like the agricultural residue burning in the Punjab, and similarly the persistent fire hotspots in forests of Myanmar, Bangladesh. So you can able to identify the different kinds of the hotspots by using the advanced GIS techniques. They are popularly known as the spatial statistics tool, and they'll use different kinds of the data mining approaches and the information to identify the areas for a different kinds of scenario. One more is that the information on invasive species management is required. All of you may be knowing that in 1992 itself, the Convention on Biological Diversity visualized that the invasive species problem is the major threat. They said that the first threat to biodiversity is due to loss of habitat, and second threat to the native biodiversity is by the invasion of the alien species. So how the invasions are happening? The invasions are happening in two ways. One is because of the human-induced disturbances mostly, like the recurrent forest fires, or maybe disturbances for the infrastructure development, like buildings, roads, such type of facilities, like then the agricultural development. So such type of land use practices also give more opportunity for the invasive species to occupy and grow. Then again, sometimes it may not be that because of the disturbances. Sometimes it may be because of the structure of the forest itself. Like if you see the major parts of Andhra Pradesh and major parts of Telangana, you have mostly the open forests. So these open forests have the sufficient amount of canopy gaps. So these canopy gaps are now occupied by the invasive species like Hyptis suavolens or Lantana camara, Eupatoria moderatum. Such type of species are now very much prevalent in the open forests. So we need to understand the disturbances with relation to the human-made and also with reference to the inherent vegetation structure. So this is the one map we produced at national level. It is not so fine scale map, so you can't say that what is the like when I say that 5 to 10% means there are 5 to 10% of invasive species are there. So here we did one exercise based on the sampling method, and we upscaled by using the vegetation type map at each district to country, state level, then country level. So what we did here that we are having a sample plot location data of more than 20,000 locations covering the entire country. And we did this exercise as part of the biodiversity characterization project and also as part of the monitoring of the biosphere reserves in India. So we have the field data spread across the country, and we've estimated the like in each plot the percentage of the invasive alien species with reference to total species. Even though their majority are in herbaceous layer or shrubby layer, but they are having the high amount of density, like the number of trees. So it is having a direct relevance, and there is a need for the more conservation interventions. And this map clearly brought into a clear visualization from that. Like if you see the Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, parts of Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh have the high prevalence of the high invasive alien species. So based on this kind of data basis, the National Biodiversity Authority, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they can go for a better management of the invasive species. Here why I am saying managing means because already they became a part of our nature and they became already part of our ecosystems. So now the only leftover thing is that we have to minimize the damage due to the invasive species. So for such type of the conservation strategies, we need the information at a national level. Then the biodiversity characterization. So this is my particular field of interest, and as a person from the taxonomy, always like be interested in identifying the important habitats for the biodiversity conservation. So now whatever is shown in the earlier slides are mostly related to optical or infrared region of remote sensing. So that may not be covering the full details of the vegetation. So there you can able to, like I said, that we can able to assess the forest cover, forest types, and we can able to estimate the tree density. Such type of information we can able to make through optical data. But hyperspectral data is more reliable with reference to the discrimination of species and also to assess the vegetation health at individual community level. So the difference here is that in multispectral, it is like a broadband data. So like in the 0.4 to 0.5 micrometer region, it is only one color. But in hyperspectral, within that like 100 nanometer area, you are having like many number of spectral bands. Like if you say like the Iris NG sensor, it is having 5 nanometer spectral width. So there is a huge amount of difference with the broadband versus the narrowband information. So you can able to make more measurements by having more number of spectral bands. So the hyperspectral remote sensing has got advancement, especially with reference to like the discrimination of species and for using the information for biophysical property like leaf area index, biomass change, and the pigment concentration. And you can use this hyperspectral remote sensing for assessing the like plant diseases and stress on vegetation. And also you can use this information for your foliar chemistry purpose, like you can able to study the carbon nitrogen ratio and many other things. Then you can able to make a better assessment of the leaf moisture and the vegetation condition or vegetation health by hyperspectral remote sensing. So here I am showing one map we developed for the Chandoli Tiger Reserve in Maharashtra. So this is a part of the Chandoli Tiger Reserve in Sahyadris of Maharashtra. So the one side I am showing the world view high resolution imagery. It is having the resolution of better than 1 meter. Then in the right side I am showing a classified map generated through the spectral variability. So here I am showing one map that they're showing the distribution of the Shannon Weir index. It means the distribution of the canopy diversity or distribution of the communities. So generally what we will do in the ground studies, that we will do plot level study and we'll say that these many number of species are available, and then we can use the abundance information and species individual information to calculate the diversity. It means mostly the Shannon Weir diversity index. But what we are doing here by using the high resolution images, because here we are having more than 4 spectral bands. In Worldview 2 also you are having 8 spectral bands. You are having near infrared 1, near infrared 2, red edge band. So many such type of bands are available in the very high resolution. So what we are making by using Worldview or by using hyperspectral is that here we are replacing the biological species concept. So here we are using the spectral variation hypothesis, and in the spectral variation hypothesis we are replacing the actual species with the spectral species. So it will help us in estimation of the local diversity and also in analyzing the dissimilarity between communities like the beta diversity. So and finally we are generating the species diversity estimate for a given region without going to the every part of the landscape. So here what for the validation purpose we will do some sampling before the classification or after the classification, and then we'll use some number of sample points for training the classifier, and then we'll use for correlation, and some sample points for final validation we'll use for the assessment of biodiversity at the community level. So one more important product we generated as part of our project on landscape level biodiversity characterization. The project was led by Dr. P.S. Roy, one of the eminent scientists in India. And all we are worked with him, and we learned the landscape ecological principles, and we have applied the different multi-criteria in understanding of the distribution of the biological richness in India. So as part of the landscape level biodiversity project, we developed a separate package that is known as a SPLAM, Spatial Landscape Analysis and Modeling Package. So later, Dr. Arijit Rai and his group, they have developed a advanced package by using the R. So whoever is interested to develop such type of maps of biological richness, they can contact Dr. Arijit Rai, IIRS, Dehradun. So here, the information or the map is not so simple. Here, the information of ground came through more than 72 institutions, like who are having high expertise in the ecology and taxonomy, and they have collected the ground sample point data, like I said, like almost 20,000 sample points covering entire India. Then from that information we got the ecosystem uniqueness, like the richness of the endemic species or threatened species, and then overall species richness per a plot. And then the biodiversity value. The biodiversity value is actually the number of economically important species. Then the terrain complexity came through the remote sensing data, and then disturbance index is based on the different the parameters like the nearest or proximity to roads, proximity to fire location, or proximity to villages or the cities. So this package was developed with the expertise of many people, and it is fully based on the landscape ecology principles. And then we have done multi-criteria analysis by using these different kinds of the ecological parameters, and then develop a map for the landscape level biological richness map for India. And important information I would like to share is that, and we have shared this information with the state forest biodiversity boards, state biodiversity boards, and also the different forest departments in country. Then the one more the advantage is that in addition to the biological richness, we have also applied some other criteria. So we have referred to the Convention on Biological Diversity guidelines book, that we have to give the equal weightage to the different criteria. In the earlier approach, like we gave like high weightage to the evergreen forest and low weightage to the deciduous forest. But as per the global guidelines, the each ecosystem is unique. So one species may be preferring deciduous forest, another species may have high preference on evergreen forest, and the economic potential also varies. Like deciduous forest is having more high economic potential as compared to the evergreen forest. So what we did here is that we implemented the 6 important criteria given by the CBD guidelines. So at national level and the regional level, we found that the ecosystem rarity is one of the important criterion, like the shola forest, the subalpine vegetation, and mangroves. They comes under the ecosystem rarity because their area of occupancy at national level is less than 2%. Then the one more map we developed is that the forest intactness map. To understand the ecological integrity of ecosystem, so we have developed one map there. What we did is that we used the forest cover maps and forest density maps generated for 1930s period to the recent one. So it means the last 8 decades, those forests are dense only. There is no change in the density category, like they have not become dense forest to open forest. They retained the similar structure overall. So and again we have some more criteria to define the forest intactness, and that publication is available in the Global and Planetary Change. Then biological richness, it is based on the earlier slide I shown it is a function of the different parameters. So that high biodiversity was used in this identification of biological significant area. Then for the biomass, the dense forests have more biomass as compared to the open forest. So we took the biomass map of the India and South Asia. Then we used the core forests. Here we applied that Ritter's et al. Landscape fragmentation tool and identified the core forest in the current scenario. Then after that, the naturalness. The 6th and foremost, one of the important parameters is that to understand the naturalness, we need to have information on primary forest. But to say which one is primary forest or secondary forest, it is very difficult. So the remote sensing derived maps are used as a proxy, and we identified the persistent forest. It means that forest is existing from the last 8 decades. So it means they may be more natural as compared with the newly added plantations or newly regenerating forest or the young forest. So these are 6 criteria, and based on that 6 criteria and equal weightage, we identified the ranking for different areas. Then I would like to emphasize on the species of the conservation significance. When you are saying the significance of conservation, the 2 types of species have the highest value. One is the threatened species, and another is the endemic species. So what assessments are saying at global level? If you see I accessed this information yesterday, and I found that as many as like 32,441 species are under threat as per the IUCN. Then if you see with reference to the estimate of IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and ecosystem services. This is the report made for 2020 year, and there is a different kind of estimate. See, in the first estimate by IUCN, the number of like it is including both animal and plant, there are around 1.7 million species are there, and this is based on the actual records. It is based on the published literature. Whereas IPBES, what they did prediction. It means they based on the ongoing scenario of the plant discoveries or the animal discoveries, they estimated that the planet Earth is having around 8.1 million species. So now, if you see there, as per IUCN, the actual estimate, 1.9% species are under threat. But as per the prediction and as per the ongoing scenario of these discoveries, now as on this date, like 12.3% of species are under threat of extinction. So this it gives more warning to the conservation community, and they said that in the report, like 1 million species are under threat. So it means 10 lakh species are under threat. So as part of our research and development program, we have developed a unique database on the species which were described very recently. So we have consulted the individual publications and also the publications of the Botanical Survey of India and Geological Survey of India from 2009 to 2018. So if you see this table, it is very much clear that at average annually, there are around 109 species are coming newly for the plants. In the case of animals, around 205 species are coming. It means the researchers or the scientists are describing new species, 205 new species on an annual basis. So then, what is the uniqueness here is that even though this information is available and very much precious, but we need to have such type of database in the geo-referenced form. So we did this exercise with 3 of our MPhil scholars with the collaboration from the Kerala, IIITMK, and we generated the point-specific information, and we generated a national database for the distribution of the newly discovered species for plants and also the animals. This is the one more map showing the distribution of the endemic faunal species in the different parts of the country. So these 2 maps are clearly brought a very important information that the majority of the plant species are found in the Kerala part of the India, and the majority of the congruence, it means the both new plant species and both new animals that like animal species, both plant and animal were described like more than 50% of species are coming from the Western Ghats, specifically from the Kerala. So this is the distribution information overlaid on the Google Earth imagery. And what is the importance of this database? So once you have the primary records of sighting, because in the animal discoveries also, in animal discoveries books, they gave the exact location of sighting. They mentioned the latitude, longitude, and we made it geo-referenced, and we found the distribution. Once you have such type of geo-referenced data, it is easy for the conservation managers and also for scientists to understand the change in the scenario of landscapes or the land use or in vegetation distribution. And we can, like even there is any change of climate or the rainfall, everything we can see and we can link with this, the point specific data, and is there any threat or any vulnerability, we can able to identify like a forewarning or early warning. Then I would like to emphasize on the species distribution modeling. This is the one plant, one tree is very much clear in this slide, that is the Pterocarpus santalinus, popularly known as red sanders. It is one of the costliest wood in the world and is mostly available in the eastern Ghats of India. And here we did the field sampling in the different parts of Kadapa hill ranges and Tirumala hills, and then we used the machine learning techniques like Maxent, like different methods like the Maxent model, then genetic algorithm for rule set prediction, artificial neural network, Diva GIS. Like there are different models are available in the open access platform, and we applied those models, and then we found the distribution of the potential distribution of species in a given range. So the majority of the species are highly concentrated, and only like more than 95% of populations are only found in the Kadapa hill ranges, because of its the unique the climate and unique the vegetation parameters. And for the model, it is not just only the point locations or the species abundance information we are providing. We are also providing the information of the 19 ecological variables like the wettest month, driest month, or like such type of 19 parameters are available on precipitation, elevation, temperature, and the habitat and the vegetation types. So once you give this information to the statistical model, those models will predict the potential range of the species. So such type of maps you can use for understanding of the climate change impact on species, and also for understanding the areas which are you can go for a restoration of the species. So finally, I would like to highlight that this paper was published yesterday in Biodiversity and Conservation. The major emphasis here is that even though it is a forest or biodiversity, they are almost similar, because the more than 90% of the biodiversity is in forest. And so we can't able to study the forest and biodiversity in isolation, and we are not conserving forest separately or biodiversity in separate way. So we need to have a comprehensive and integrative approach. And here, the remote sensing is not going to make any replacement of the conventional field studies or explorations, but it will give more enhanced information for the better management of the resources. So one need to concentrate, not only like the taxonomist is only studying the community composition, or the one ecologist is studying only the functional aspects of the biodiversity or the species populations. Now there is one concept called a novel concept by the Pereira et al. They are worked under the CBD umbrella, and they published a very novel paper on the concept of essential biodiversity variables. And as part of that essential biodiversity variables, so you need to generate the information on at least all these 5. If you are providing information only on one parameter, it may not provide you the enough information or the quantification for understanding of the biodiversity change. So we need to study in integration, like all we need to have a collaboration like taxonomist, ecologist, geographer, remote sensing person, computer specialist. Many people have to come together, climatologist, everyone. Then we will have a more robust and very detailed information on the community composition, ecosystem structure, ecosystem function, species traits, and species populations. But then what remote sensing is doing exactly is that it is known as a remote sensing of Earth observations. Mainly the variables are like it provides us the thematic variables classes like the land use, land cover, vegetation types, and communities or species, or sometimes like by using hyperspectral remote sensing or very high resolution data, you can able to map the compositional diversity at the tree level, or at least for the tree canopies. Then we can use the different index variables like the normalized difference vegetation index, enhanced vegetation index, normalized burnt ratio. Such type of index are very much useful in understanding of the vegetation health. Then the texture variables also very much important in understanding of the complexity and the diversity within the canopy. So texture variables are very much useful by remote sensing images, that we can able to understand the canopy heterogeneity and the relevance of the canopy heterogeneity versus the distribution or the richness of birds, mammals, and the plants. Again, there is one more important variable is that the geophysical variables, like they are sea surface temperature, land surface temperature. Such type of variables are only possible through remote sensing, and they are directly helpful in understanding of the ecological patterns and the variations in the distribution of species. Then again, we are having the different sensors for the analyzing the topography. So they are known as digital elevation models. So now we are having many number of satellites from different countries like NASA, ESA, ISRO. Then we can use the information from different topographic databases, and we can link with the distribution of species. So if there is a change in the topography also, we can able to attribute it, because some species are very much particular. Some species are prefers to grow in only in high altitude. Some species are only having inclination to grow in middle altitude. Some species are only having the priority to be in low elevation. So such type of information is you can able to link with the remote sensing remote sensing based topographic data. So finally, as a conservation as part of conservation of the resources, what we have to do is that we have to develop a information on the remote sensing based indicators. For example, deforestation, increasing of trend of deforestation or increasing trend of afforestation. Similarly, like increasing number of fires. So indicators we can able to generate through remote sensing based data. Again, you can able to make scenarios like the modeling. What could be the, like if the ongoing or business as usual scenario. So what could be the fate of Indian forest? So we can able to build a different scenarios using the multi-temporal images. Again, that for short-term and long-term conservation, we need to have the individual species-based conservation strategies and action plans. So again, here also, the very high resolution images are going to play a very major role. And finally, for understanding the implications of conservation, like the policy goals and targets. For example, I'll mention that there is a globally one important flagship program known as a biosphere reserve monitoring. So there are, like if you take in India, we are having 18 biosphere reserves. And here the policy is to have a information on the status of the biosphere reserves. It means after the declaration, what is there any change in the vegetation condition or the biodiversity? In that, with that reference also, we can able to see that yes, the biosphere reserve program or the tiger reserve program have achieved the targets. So by using the different remote sensing based proxies or surrogates, we can able to see that yes, there is no deforestation, no fragmentation, no change in the fire. There are no more number of fires. So such type of information we will get through indicators and scenarios, and we can build for the better policy goals and targets. Then finally, for the children, for the citizens, and for the policymakers, this remote sensing based information, because the most of the information are available in the outputs are available in the form of map form. So one can able to use this information for the environmental awareness and also in the policy making. So finally, I would like to thank our Director NRSC, Deputy Director NRSC, my colleagues in the Forestry and Ecology Group, Forest Biodiversity and Ecology Division, and also my strong team who worked with a lot of commitment, like 9 PhD scholars, 19 MPhil students, and 4 MTech students. They have the passion towards the conservation of nature, and they have done a very good study, and they developed the information from like the biosphere reserves and also for the information on the states of like Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Such type of database, we have developed very unique databases through remote sensing, and many other students also contributed very significantly of using of remote sensing, and we published all the results of national databases in very peer-reviewed journals like Biodiversity and Conservation, Global and Planetary Change, Environmental Monitoring and Assessment, and such type of many peer-reviewed journals we selected. And in addition to that, we are also hosting the majority of the national databases on like biosphere reserves, forest types, forest cover change, similar type of databases on our BOWN platform for better visualization by the citizens, also by policymakers. Thank you very much again for Biodiversity Conservation Foundation for giving me a valuable opportunity to showcase our applications of remote sensing and at country level and the regional level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. You made a wonderful presentations. I think this is an eye-opening and virtual tour from ISRO. Thanks for your wonderful presentation. And also, you are taking a virtual tour for us, especially in remote sensing. What are the aspects in being able to work in the field of conservation?
Yes.
Even especially how the invasive species affect the biodiversity, how the fragmentation is affect the biodiversity. What are the aspects even basically without entering in the field, we able to do all those things in the field of remote sensing and satellite telemetry images. You did a wonderful job and you made a wonderful publications too. Thank you, Doctor. One of my colleagues has to conclude this today's session.
Yeah.
Very good evening to all participants and Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy sir. So it's a great pleasure for me to just conclude. Dr. Reddy sir is having a very good contribution for the development of remote sensing and GIS in biodiversity and forest ecology in the country. Sir, you have made the presentation starting from the basic level, like terminologies, remote sensing basic, and what can we map, monitor and predict with the remote sensing, and how deforestation can be trapped. What is the definition for forest land cover, tree cover, and open land cover, forest fire, developmental activities, how it can be just tracked by remote sensing, and how daily monitoring of forest fire is done in India. And you have just shown the very good case studies as well. And assessment of carbon stock at tree level and invasive species is another one big forum, and its threat has to be addressed. And you made it very interesting, and even you explained it very well for the advanced technique about the hyperspectral remote sensing and its applications. And also you touched upon towards the biological richness, species richness, and its conservation of individual species, and how these species distribution and modeling can be done by remote sensing. It's very nice to have, sir, and almost you have contributed very well towards the country. And Dr. Reddy is having more than 403 publication and 4,103 citations were scored. And congratulations for the biodiversity conservation publication as well, what you got it yesterday, sir. On behalf of BCF India, we take this opportunity to thank our eminent speaker, Dr. C. Sudhakar Reddy, Head, Forest Biodiversity and Ecological Division, National Remote Sensing Center, ISRO, India, in spending his valuable time during this COVID-19 situation for sharing his experience on application on remote sensing in forest resource management and conservation. So you made the presentation very simple, and the session was very informative and interesting. And it is like something you made it understandable for all group of audience. BCF has a diversified participants like UG, PG students, research scholars, professors, stakeholders, NGOs, and government official, conservationists, policy makers, and as well as international participants. I hope so. For the scholars, you would have made a very good idea for taking up a new dimension of research in the field of conservation using remote sensing. Thank you so much, sir, for just giving a brief session. And we appreciate all our participants in participating in this international webinar as well. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.